So change, right? In a moment, she felt a little change. We deal with change everywhere, and oftentimes I'll work with change management, and you think it's like this big change initiative, but we're experiencing change all the time. The weather, our moods, a shoelace, right? Tied, untied, whatever it is. And so most of today will be tools and just frameworks around how we deal with change. I also want to note before I formally introduce myself is that I love to start and work with mindfulness around improv games as an actor, right? It's about being in the moment. And there's so much richness. Like I do the name clap in a different way with lots of layers and longer workshops, but there's just so much you can integrate and then so much great and rich conversation that comes out of that. So, my name is Renee Meddy. I help individuals and teams really lead with heart and hustle and provide some of the essential skills that are needed to do that. I'm also a mom, a wife, a daughter, a sister, a lover of animals and coffee and the outdoors, and a lover of love. I've been calling myself lately a multi-potentialite. Has anybody heard that? Multi-potentialite. Mm-hmm. I am more of a jack of all trades, master at none. I have many, many interests, a lot of creative endeavors, so I've done a lot of different things in my life. But some of my professional experience that affords me the opportunity to be here is that I'm an executive coach and leadership consultant. I'm also founder of a mindfulness-based preschool in Seattle, and I'm a former kindergarten, first grade teacher, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade emotional behavioral disorder teacher, and a former special ed consultant. But I'd be remiss not to mention that, I don't know if you guys can see this, that I stand on the shoulders of giants. So many of these organizations and people have been a part of my path, and I could not do what I love to do without the support of these people. And so many of them I am so grateful to call my colleagues and humbled to call some of them my friends. And with this work that I love to do so much, I just hope to pay it forward, and my life has been transformed by this. I've been transformed by this. People around me's lives have been transformed, and I only hope for all of you that it can be the same for you. So, having said all that, our journey together will be around leadership, some change management, and what else did I say here? Oh, slowing down to speed up, and then ways and tools to manage change and chaos with a little more ease. So some of the shared agreements, if we had more time, we would do this together, but these are kind of some of the common ones that we do. Everybody is welcome, thoughts, identities, all of our being is welcome here. Confidentiality is key, so anything that is shared either as a group or with a partner just stays, as they say in Vegas, what happens in the West in Chicago stays in the West in Chicago. Being kind and curious, and then just having a lot of fun. And just be yourself and bring some authenticity. So often I will start with, there's varying differences with where people are in mindfulness and what that looks like. But at its simplest form, Eckhart Tolle says it takes one conscious breath to presence. So we can just take a breath together, however you're comfortable. You don't have to change position or anything, whatever's comfortable for you. And we'll just take a collective breath together, bringing all of your attention to your inhale and all of your attention on the exhale. Ready? Inhale. And exhale. So presence. Why is presence important? I believe that presence is the leadership initiative and imperative. When you have presence is the greatest gift that you can give someone, right? And where there's presence means you're in the present moment. When you're in the present moment, that is the only time that anything can be done about anything. It's the only moment that's actionable. And it's using mindfulness that is a way to cultivate presence. And similar to James, what James said in his talk, mindfulness is not the only way, but it's one of the ways, and in and around leadership, I've found it's probably one of the stronger ways, because in order to get somewhere, you have to know where you are. You have to have some sense of awareness, and that level of awareness can differ, per person, but it's a great starting point. So all of us are leaders. How many of you would consider yourself a leader? Yeah. If you had asked me that a couple years ago, my hand would have been down. It took me a long time, even though I was doing leaderly-like things, to consider myself a leader. And if you were at the Administrators Academy, Toby shared this definition of what a leader is, which I loved and helped me start identifying myself as a leader. So a leader is anyone who takes responsibility for recognizing the potential in people and ideas and has the courage to develop that potential. So we're all leaders, whether you're leading your classroom, your team, in a building, your family, your life. But most importantly, you're leading by example. And that's the piece around mindfulness and awareness that's most important to me, and I think is important for the sustainability of the field, is the embodiment of the practice. Right? So leading by example. And as a leader, you need some essential skills. Some of this comes from the core competencies of the SEL, of CASEL. Self-awareness, self-management is probably mentioned in a lot of other talks. And then there's some skills under that: attention, focus, concentration, resiliency, clarity. Compassion is a big piece of it that I think is a really important part, and sometimes it gets thrown in there. But when there is mindfulness, you cannot practice mindfulness without compassion, the common humanity of people, and that's where the action can happen, right? Having a bunch of aware people running around is not necessarily the best thing for the world. You need to balance it with compassion. They always have kind of the metaphor of a bird of two wings. One wing is mindfulness and the other one is compassion. And you need both to thrive. Soft skills is a name. I work a lot in corporate, and they throw around soft skills, and it can kind of be like a bad term, like, oh, we don't need those soft skills. So I'm really trying to shift that paradigm to essential skills. Yeah. So why are these skills important in bringing anything to the world, in leading in whatever way that you're leading? Because there's only one thing that we can guarantee. Any guesses? What's that? Connection. There's actually two things we can guarantee.
In leadership?
In life. In leadership. In life.
Well, that we will die.
Yeah, that's the one that I'm not covering today.
That's the one I'm like,
yeah.
It's like,
we're all going to die.
Yeah.
What's the other thing that we can guarantee with 100% certainty? Breath. Oh, maybe there's three things. Now I have to add three to my list.
You're going to get old?
Change. That is the one thing that you can
Yeah.
guarantee with 100% certainty. And so some of you noticed how you deal with change in life. And, I had to deal with some change here. I was not expecting to be sitting at a table, which is lovely, by the way. I'm like so happy this is the way it turned out. But as leaders, you're dealing with an exorbitant amount of change. Right? So what are the ways, how do we deal with change? What are the ways in which that we can bring our best selves to dealing with that change? And like you saw in that game, there were, I was paying attention because I knew to pay attention to different things, and there were so many changes, from inflection to some people with open palms to closed fists to the angle in which your arms are back, the head tilt, so many different
Tummy
things.
out.
Tummy out, yeah, arching, not arching. And so change happens even when we're not aware of it. It just slowly creeps in there, right? It's like waking. You just think, you're like, oh, just this dessert today. And like 3 months later, like, how did I gain 10 pounds, right? And so there's big initiatives, a big move across the country, or a big thing that's going on at work. There's those real little ones that are probably more impactful in our lives because we're not paying attention to them. So let's look at today's reality. Maybe someone can read for me so that I don't have to keep turning.
We unlock our phones X amount of times per day.
How many times do you think you unlock your phone? I'll give the caveat that if you're working in a classroom, hopefully, likely it is less if you're a classroom teacher because you're not You don't have your phone on you all the time. But having said that, think about like the weekend when you're home. Guesses?
I don't think I could even guess because I'm not in the classroom, so I work off of my phone.
Yeah.
The amount of
Yep.
times that
I'm saying
Lock
a day,
phones.
I check in with my phone, which means I have to unlock it to check into it. And I'd say definitely, possibly 400 times.
300-400 times. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah.
scary.
The average is 80 times per day, but that was a study done 10 years ago. So it's
Yeah.
way higher,
Yeah.
I was
right?
gonna say upwards of 50, but I guess.
So that's
I
unlocked.
may be unaware of how many times I'm.
That's not, and I think you can track
There's an
that
app.
now.
There's
You
an
can
app.
track that
Yeah.
now.
And I mean, that's all,
Phone
if,
itself,
as an
or at least iPhone.
administrator in an education
Yeah.
system, that's all you're doing.
Yeah.
Is you're handling people's
Yeah.
tasks, people's
Right.
emails, you're communicating with people, you're sending things.
And how many times do you think you touch your phone? The whole day, yeah. That's way higher. 2,617. Just to add to it. Now, how many minutes do you think it takes to rebound from doing something at a task at hand? So if you're in the classroom and you're teaching and then an announcement comes on the loudspeaker and your kids are engaged, you're engaged, you get the interruption, and then coming back to that same engagement, how many minutes do you think it takes to rebound?
I'm saying like 3 to 4 minutes.
3 or 4 minutes? 5?
It's gonna be awful.
It's gonna be awful. I have no idea.
I think it could, it depends on some of these. I was doing a thing in a school the other day where the bell was so loud,
Yeah.
it was like 10 minutes maybe.
From the neuroscience perspective of like the state of flow, 23 minutes. So it takes 23 minutes to get back to that same state of flow or engagement that you have. Now, how often do you think we're interrupted? How many minutes do you think?
Every minute.
Every minute. Yeah.
I mean, one class period, usually 3 or 4 announcements that pop up.
Yeah.
It's like, please excuse this interruption. Please excuse this
Yep.
interruption.
So every 11 minutes is, this was 10 years ago. So probably a lot higher.
In a school or
In general, just interruptions in general. So if you do the math on that, it takes 23 minutes to get back, but you're being,
Back in the flow.
which is why you always feel like you're behind the 8 ball
Yeah.
or on a hamster wheel,
I was
right?
surprised.
That's why
Right,
sometimes I
and
put my
You
phone
wake
on
up
Do Not
behind
Disturb.
before your feet touch the floor.
Yep.
Yes.
And go ahead.
I was gonna ask, like, what were they talking about with interruptions? Like, what specifically?
Anything. Well, I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
So what causes those interruptions?
Yes.
Distractions, distractions, distractions. So it's anything. Notifications on your phone.
Hunger, thirst.
If thoughts, it's anything.
you need to use the bathroom.
Yep, bio breaks. And so here are some. Also, you know, you're on the phone while you're eating, right? It's the monotasking versus multitasking, right? You're doing multiple things at the same time. I just have some pictures, texting while driving, answering the phone while driving, all those kinds of things. The thing about this and kind of the underlying foundation of this talk is that a lot of these things are unconscious, have become unconscious habits, right? It's just kind of the norm these days. And so we want to move from unconscious habits to conscious habits. So, and why is that important? Why would it be important to move from unconscious to conscious habits?
Because then you're aware, right?
Choice.
You have a choice, yeah. So when you become aware, you have choices. So I'm a very visual learner, and so just 2 nights ago, I was like, I need a visual for this. I can't just talk about this. So here's the roadmap to choice with just some ideas. So unconscious, right? There's things in our career that we do unconsciously, that we think about unconsciously, and it hits all areas. There's health, just your everyday interests and hobbies, conditioned thinking, right? Many of us are living a life that we were inherited, or you know, we're just doing things because our parents did it, or because that's the way our parents taught us. And particularly if you've never traveled or you haven't been exposed, like different areas in the country and the world where they haven't been exposed to other cultures. And then unconscious worldviews. And then we start practicing, and we pause, and we start getting conscious. And then we start developing awareness in all these areas and the other areas areas in our life, right? And that gives us those choices. So now we can choose, do I want to continue eating that ice cream at 8 o'clock at night before bed because I'm stressed? Or do I not want to? And the key here isn't the right or wrong of whether the ice cream at 8 o'clock is bad or not. It's that we're doing it consciously versus unconsciously. And then you keep developing and practicing awareness. You know, the one thing I learned on my own path in mindfulness is the amount of layers, right? The onion that just gets peeled, and it's a journey and a process, and there is no end, as many speakers have talked about. It's just keep peeling away the layers, right? And it's not all rainbows and unicorns when it happens. So I'm going to offer a conscious leader model. I will say I do not believe that there is one size fits all leadership model, and there is no one path in how you use mindfulness, but this model is the most simple, and I feel like resonates with a lot of people. So let me know if you've ever seen this model before.
That's just a line, right?
Yeah, it's a line. It's a
Wanna
very
make sure I'm checking myself.
could have changed right before
Yeah,
your eyes.
right.
So this is a very binary model. You're either above the line or you're below the line. This comes, I did not make this up, this comes from Katie and Gay Hendricks, and then also adapted by Diane Chapman from 15 Commitments of Leadership. And so you're either above the line or below the line. And so, let me just make sure that
Seems dualistic.
it seems, yeah. So as a leader, just with a show of hands, how many of you are above the line? How many of you are below the line?
I walk the line.
You walk the line, there you go.
Destroy the line.
Yeah, you do destroy the line.
I time myself up with it.
So as a leader, a classroom teacher, a parent, whoever you work with, you're making quick decisions based on very little information. I give you very little information about this, right? So above the line is open, curious, and committed to learning. Below the line is closed, defensive, and committed to being right. There is no way I'm going to get through all this content. I won't change it. Yeah.
So you'll send it to us, right?
I will.
No, I'm just being selfish.
Yes, I will send it. Yeah. So open, curious, committed to learning above the line. Closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Now, how many of you, show of hands now, are above the line as a leader?
Can you be both?
You can be both.
Like
I think I'm like this.
combo,
Yeah.
Like Barbie.
My intention is to be.
Yes, right.
I'm a wave, I'm like this.
So how many of you have the thought that being above the line is better? Right. So I want to be clear here. Being above the line is not better. The key point that matters here is whether you know in the moment whether you're above the line or below the line. And when we're distracted, we're often below the line. And when we lead above the line, we can usually navigate chaos with a little more ease. All right, now we're gonna play a little game. I do have to read this just because it's a lot. So we're gonna talk a little bit about how you respond to stress. And the way I'm defining stress here is important. Stress here is defined as the space between how life is versus how you expect it to be. Okay? So it's that if only thinking, or like only if I had more money then I would be better. Only if I could please others. Only if I were in control, right? It's expecting something to be different than it is. So it's helpful to learn about yourself in terms of how you lead others, because your actions invite behaviors from others. So depending on how you act is an invitation for the way others will treat you. And what's important to remember about this activity is that this is about what you do, not who you are. Okay, so this is about the behavior, it is not who you are as a person. So, you get 4 wonderful packages delivered to your house. And you don't want any of these packages. But the driver is only going to take 1 back. Okay. So, here are what the packages represent. Can someone read for me so I'm not?
Packages.
So the first
One-
package is-
First package is rejection and hassles. The second package is criticism and humiliation.
I got that one either.
The next package is stress and pain. And the next package is meaninglessness and
Unimportant.
unimportant.
Special delivery.
Okay.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
So this stress and pain is a different, you know, like kind of just pain in the body or pain in the heart and your kind of nervous system stress, okay? So you have to return one of the boxes. So it's rejection and hassles, criticism and humiliation, stress and pain, meaningless and unimportance. And if you're struggling, it represents what you most want to avoid in life when you're stressed out.
I would say meaningless and unimportant.
Okay. So everybody go ahead and write down what your thing is.
Yeah, rejection, hassles, stress and pain, criticism and humiliation, meaninglessness and unimportance. Rejection and hassle, stress and pain, criticism and humiliation, meaninglessness and unimportance.
Unimportance.
We're writing down the one.
Just the one package that you
Alright.
want to give back. It's the one you avoid
Yes.
most in life. We all have all of these at some point in our life, but this is the one like your default under stress. What's the thing you want to push away? And then if you could give a second one, go ahead and write a second one down.
Thank you.
I'm passing them all back.
I will not take them all back.
You're donating them to charity.
Does anyone have a sheet of paper I can use? Thank you. Thank you.
And you did say you would share this, right?
Yes. This actually comes from Positive Discipline Curriculum. Is anyone familiar? I used to be a trainer for them. I love doing this with parents. They have fun with this stuff. All right. Are you ready? All right. So, what these represent. So, rejection and hassles is pleasing. Stress and pain is comfort. Criticism and humiliation is control. And meaningless and unimportance is superiority. Okay, so I have to read some things here. So the first box that you chose to give away, right, is when you're stressed. That's the thing you want to avoid. The second box that you chose is your method of operation.
Oh, for sure, that's so fun.
Is that true? So how many of you find resonance?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we all experience all of these, let's just say,
no,
okay?
that is for sure true. This is amazing.
I'm gonna do this with my wife as soon as I get
So here's a few things. I will send, I mean, it's long, so I'm not going to read all of it, but I will just read a couple things and just see if it resonates with you. So that first box is at your worst, the second box is at your best, right? So if you have superiority, sometimes you take on too much, you're overwhelmed, you're a know-it-all and you like to be right, you may blame instead of take responsibility, you do it all yourself instead of delegating, and you try to hide feelings of inferiority. At your at your best, if you have superiority at as your second, idealistic and have a lot of social interest, you're productive and knowledgeable, you make people laugh, encourage others, be a leader instead of waiting for others to tell you what to do and get things done, you're creative. Now, if your first box is control, you lack spontaneity, create social and emotional distance, maybe emotionally unavailable, sometimes wait for permission, you're critical and fault-finding, and if control is at your best, as your second box, you're maybe organized, you're a good leader, good crisis manager, coordinate activities, you're persistent, you're objective and logical, you get tasks done quickly. Now, if pleasing is your first box, you may be too apologetic or give in too much, have difficulty taking a stand, not say what you want, deny problems, say yes when you want to say no. And if it is your second box is pleasing, you're friendly and have lots of friends, you're considerate and sensitive to the feelings of others, adaptable, good listener, empathetic, love easily. And then those of you that have comfort as your first, hard to motivate, idle and non-productive, take the path of least resistance, do only the things you do well, judge uncomfortable situations rather than confront them. And as your second box, comfort is stable and dependable, create a comfortable, relaxing atmosphere for others, you're easy to please, and you do what you do very well. And there's lots of other things. But how many of you, a lot of that resonated? Yeah. And some? Anybody that was like, no, that's not me at all?
Is the second box?
It's kind of your mode of operation, so it's the thing
Oh,
that
I think I did it
is.
wrong. Well, I got the first box right.
Yeah. Usually the second box, whatever, it's the second thing you want to avoid, but it's the thing that comes out as like your strengths. It serves you well, but it's still below the line.
Stress and pain was my second box.
Yeah. So stress and pain is comfort. Comfort. So comfort then, so stable, dependable, flexible, easygoing, being good at letting others feel important.
When I just read comfort, I thought, yeah, I eat a lot of food, like after 8 o'clock. Like I go to the fridge for comfort food.
Mm.
That's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
I-
yeah.
And I rock back and forth a lot to self-comfort
Yeah.
myself. So it looks like
Yeah.
I'm losing it.
Usually the first box is like the thing that really resonates with everyone, and then the second can be,
For me, it was the other way around. For me, the first box, what I chose first, didn't sound like me,
Mhm.
but the second box did.
Mhm.
And then when listening to them both, it sounded like they were like complete
opposites. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because so what's interesting is I used to do this prior to my mindfulness practice, and when I started doing it with mindfulness, and I was like, oh, that's so interesting because oftentimes, like for me, when I said, oh, that doesn't sound like me, it wasn't because I wasn't aware. I wasn't ready to look at that piece yet. I'm not saying that that's about you, but as you progress in awareness, you start realizing the things, because we can get so stuck in our conditioning. I was like, I'm a hero, I'm a savior, I'm gonna help people, right? And once you unpeel those layers of like what you're actually not doing, but you think you have good intent, but it ends up being a different interpretation.
So I also got a little confused between, to me, criticism and rejection are kind of one and the same. Like if I'm being criticized, I'm being rejected. If I'm being
Mhm.
rejected, then I'm
Mm.
being criticized.
Mhm.
So I got a little bit turned on my head. I feel like more the people pleasing. Anyway, it doesn't really matter, but I mean, they're both an issue for me. I don't like being criticized.
You found some things that, yeah.
I'm definitely a people pleaser and I'm in control, so I got them all.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, I'll give this to you as a reflection, but we won't actually do the exercise now. I'll read the questions for the reflection. And again, these slides will be in that link that Tracy sends out. But what is standing in the way of you leading consciously?
Rejection.
If it wasn't in your way, what would leading look like for you? What do you need most right now? And why is that important to you?
Can you read the first two again?
Sure. What is standing in the way of you leading consciously? If this wasn't in your way, what would leading look like? What do you need most right now, and why is that important to you? And whenever I present, I always want the information I present to be also things that you can use. And so these are, very powerful coaching questions that you can use with your spouse, your team, your whoever with kids. And it brings it out of them instead of having, that's a very open-ended question for people, all those questions, right?
And you could take that word leading out and put teaching,
Anything, yeah. Parenting,
parenting,
yeah.
learning.
Anything.
I'd love to hear what everybody wrote.
We can do that. Does anyone have?
When we talk about the boxes.
No, what you
Just in general,
asked.
what is standing in the way of leading consciously? Maybe just answering that one, if you feel not everybody has to answer it. You want to start, Barnaby, since you want to?
It's a lack of trust. Hard to trust.
And then see how the follow-up questions, how that for yourself is understanding, right? If you did trust, what would leading look like? And what do you need right now? And then why is that important? Anyone else have a burning desire to share?
Yeah, I think mine is similar to Barnaby's, and it's like faith or trust that it's all gonna be all right. Because then I wouldn't be so affected by being a leader and you being upset with me.
Yeah.
And that has created such confusion in my organization because then what I go to is people pleasing.
Yes.
And then I'm not
Yep.
being straight
Yep.
with you because I don't trust that it's gonna be all right. Right? And just this vicious cycle of.
And just having that awareness and then being able to name it changes how you handle yourself, and then what we talked about earlier about the actions, how that invites the behaviors of others. It's a whole system, right? And so for me, fear stands in the way of, right, you know, and I go into people pleasing because I'm afraid of what others think. And, you know, what would that look like? I would do a lot more leaderly things,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I would put more of my gift out into the world. And so through the practice, that's what I'm working through. Right? So I have a big idea. It's not a new idea, but it's a big idea. Is that by slowing down, we can speed up. And speeding up not from, you know, that sounds like the antithesis of mindfulness, right? But it's speeding up so we can create the space, so we can get this into the world, have it be sustainable. And we'll go through some of the, that helps you be an effective.
I would say we're at 10 minutes before the next session,
Okay.
so yeah.
Oh, so that means we're done.
We're done, but if you want to end with the closing,
With a oh my goodness.
I just wish we could, this is such a powerful little critical friends group.
Yeah. I would love to.
you could
if
put your
wanna put
names on a piece of
emails,
paper
yeah.
and even just your
Send that.
names, and then I can connect, I can like look up all the emails if you want, and then create a mentoring group.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
I have
I'm going
it
to
on.
end with this story, just because the story is so powerful. So, slowing down, James was great because I kind of referenced to the pause and the choice between stimulus and response. And so I do this work, right? How many of you that saying the cobbler's kid has no shoes, right? Like the thing that you do, you don't do for yourself or your family. And so my son is in 8th grade. He started in Montessori. We moved, transitioned to a Catholic school. Very different, if you don't know the difference, right? And so test, homework, stress, academics, all of that stuff. So this fall, we're at one of those bouncy houses there, you know? So he's really stressed out. I'm very close to, he's 13, very close to him, and he shut down, right? We understand the brain science of stress, and his prefrontal cortex was not working. I know this cognitively, but it doesn't matter. He needed to get the thing done, and now we're running late for school, and I'm frustrated with him. And so I decided, I'm like, just get up, do your work. I'm gonna go drop the other 2 off at school. I'll come back, and maybe you'll go in late. And I'm leaving the room, and he's like, Mom, you sound frustrated. I'm like, and so I'm standing in the hallway breathing, and I'm like, I'm not frustrated. Or I said, I'm not mad. He said, you sound angry. I'm not angry, I'm just really frustrated. I said, I'll be back. So I drop the kids off to school, and I'm like all worked up inside. And I'm driving home, and I'm like, literally, this is my self-talk. Hey, what are you doing? You teach this stuff for a living. You know what stress does to the brain. I get teary when I talk about it. And so I put on the fake happy face. I'm like, okay, you're gonna go in, you're gonna be happy, we're gonna go get lunch, and he loves going to this jumpy house. So I get home, and he was supposed to be dressed and ready, and so I call him up. I'm like, no, I'll come up, and he throws himself on the couch, and he's still in his robe. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I'm like, go get dressed. We're gonna go have some fun. And he looks at me, and he's like, really? And I said, really? And I'm like, we're gonna go to the jumpy house and go get breakfast. And he just burst into tears. long story short, we go 2 hours later, we have fun. I also, which I don't normally do, I also was jumping because it's a weekday, right? And it was such a great conversation about the importance of taking care of yourself, having fun, playing. The moral of the story is that 5 hours after that, in and out of productive work time, clear cognitive thinking about like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna take a break, and then I'm gonna work on this, and then I'm gonna go outside, and I wasn't expecting that, right? And so to see the power of the pause right in front of me play out, and it was just, and then I talked to him later about that piece of it, the awareness of that, to bring that to his attention, and it's like, I need to do more of this too, you know, and like, so with that, there was so much more, there's like 4 more days where, thank you so much for being here, yeah.
Where's the place for